queerness is not just about sexuality for me. It's very much about how I design my life, how I, do these things outside of sexual scenarios. Like anyone else, I've gone through the motions of understanding, do I want a kid? Do I want to get married? If then when? So, since in my partnership there is no man, I'm sure it will be a whole different world of challenges to even announce that partnership to the world, let alone have a child, go through the legal processes, all of that.
To just kind of give a heads up to everybody, how do I know you? You were doing a postgrad, and I came as a faculty, and I used to teach in your college, and I used to basically teach and cover the subject of business comms, business communication. I really felt that you were very your critical thinking and how you had awareness of things. You had a point of view. You were socially, politically aware of what was happening, and I really liked that you presented your point of view always, and you had that thinking. So great to have you here.
I am so excited to be here, and so good to know that that's what you thought of me as a student because I was also like very in awe of you as a teacher because it was such a free flowing space. So yeah, good to know.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why I really wanted to speak to you and have you here, you shared something about your own identity voluntarily, volitionally once with me. And you told me, you came out and told me that you are part of the queer community. And that was really wonderful that you could feel that safety, that you could see, share that with me. And I really want to thank you again for feeling that safety. And what I wanted to understand, through this conversation is the struggle in our time to belong to the community was very different. And the world has changed completely. Like being in the community, I really wanted to understand from a young person who's almost you like a Gen Z only, I would say. What are the living or the lived realities of today for a poor person in 2026? So
I'm someone who realized it in their early 20s, which is not a bad time. I think on an average, it's a good early, you could call it an early time to realize. Those people are lucky who know that, realize that about themselves even earlier. But I think the common experience in India, especially, would be that most people realize it a little bit later in their life. When I consciously accepted that about myself, I the label that I use for myself right now is queer. When I accepted that, the first line of thought that I can remember is I was extremely excited. First of all, I felt a sense of relief. Ki, okay, now I have an answer. Now I know something about myself. It felt really good in my body in that sense. And the next thing I remember is that I wanted to have a community. I started looking for ways that I could meet more people like me and people unlike me and find out what it means. And not even just that, just to be वहां से that dissonance started becoming really clear for me. The way I move in the world, the way a straight person moves, my straight friend moves in the world is different. There is a difference here. So I went through that phase where I was signing up for a lot of things, anything that would come my way that would mean that I could meet other queer people, I would try that. Which has been, I think, in the last 5-6 years, I've done a lot of that. Recently, I went to a party, queer party, where I realized, ki, oh, okay, I have made these connections that I can, call these people my friends in the queer community.
I said that the cognitive task has shifted from locating identity to managing identities across platforms, across audiences, and contexts. Now, with social media, it's so much there. We didn't have it. So, this is not about liberation or operation, it's a structural shift, like from scarcity of information to abundance of identity narratives, right? So, in this question, from the perspective of owning your identity, if you have to look from that lens, what would you add to the question of who you are being part of the community? How do you identify yourself?
I have always felt a little bit different about myself, but not in a very conscious way. I was not moving through the world thinking, ki, "Oh, I am different. I am different." The way you actually live that reality is things that are foreign to you stand out to you. So you try to be more like that. You try to fit in a little bit. Now I have that perspective in hindsight. Ki, okay, I've been trying to fit in a lot in so many ways, even before the sexuality angle came in. I've been extremely lucky in that way. There wasn't even a question of being scared when I realized that about myself. For me, it's like I'll only be scared in a scenario where I'm going out there and matlab mere dimag mein it's like if I'm involved in a political sort of a thing, that's where I have to be scared. I've been lucky enough to have these workspaces as well, which have been very welcoming about it. If not on the face, then at least it's on paper. Even if they don't know what to do about it, it's acknowledged and it's recognized. It's fine. It's fine to be out at the places that I've worked at. It's fine to be out. I guess it's a huge privilege for me that I don't relate to that feeling of fear that that older queers must have felt when they came out, especially because it was not legalized at that point as well. So I think that has helped me a lot because I didn't have to deal with that mental barrier, which can create so much depression within that moral space of negativity. Ki, okay, I'm doing something wrong right now. I didn't have to deal with all of that because for me, it really felt like a puzzle piece fitting together. When it comes to being different, the older queer people that I know, I find them very inspiring in that sense कि they've cracked the code of being unapologetic about who they are. They know who they are. They operate in the world from that place, and there is no sense of ki, oh, I'm this way, so what will this other person think? So they have that gift of age, that settled feeling, which I've been chasing for a long time, and it's very nice to see people from the community live a realized life like that. I recently met someone older who's dating, and I get to have this equation with them where they give me dating advice. So what better life could I have imagined for myself, right? And I see everyone being so passionate about creating a community as well. Everyone's doing a great job at that, at like keeping each other together, and they can catch if you're feeling something that they have already felt. They'll give you advice. So it's a pleasure to have that. But if I hadn't gone out and put myself in these spaces, I would not have. Matlab, for straight people, you can find friends anywhere who you can relate with, right? For I can also find people. I've lived chunk of my life being straight, so I can do that. But a part of me craves that kind of connection as well, where you can. It would be very rare for me to find someone who's queer, and I just find them like that. So I have to involve myself actively in these spaces, which I think must have been harder, maybe easier in some ways for older queer people. I'm not sure.
Swechha, when I think of this, earlier generations often had to spend years figuring out who they were, right? Being part of the community. Your generation seems to have inherited a language of identity, which you just also kind of shared, right? So, a person may feel deeply connected to hundreds of people who share an identity which is simultaneously, there with everybody, but in their personal physical space, they also feel very disconnected from their neighborhood, their city, their workplace, their family, the physical inhabit, I would say. There is this high, like, symbolic belonging, but low embodied belonging, I would say. So, has that, has this changed? Has this selfhood become simpler?
Definitely, there is a sense of more. I do get to meet more queer people online in online spaces than in offline spaces. I'm mostly surrounded by straight people, so that kind of difference is present in my neighborhood. If I'm living in a certain place, I'm always on guard. Ki, am I exhibiting some kind of behavior that will get me clocked as this queer person, right? So these are the little things that I have to be, especially as a woman who's growing older, I guess. These are the things that kind of irk me a little bit because I can't be as free moving. It's one of those things I wouldn't even know what to do with it if I was told ki, okay, now you can do this. I wouldn't even know how to behave like that right now because it's not like I get to spend most of my time with around queer people. So that's also something that has to be defined and created. But yeah, I am definitely lucky that I get to have some of these online spaces translated into offline hangs also. So I have some of that. A lot of people don't even have that. So yeah, whatever sort of thing you're into, there is a queer space for it these days. Especially, I guess, living in a city like Delhi must be the same in the bigger cities, Bangalore, Delhi, Bombay. I get to be a part of a sports group. I get to play cricket with a bunch of queer women. I get to travel with them. So, and there are poetry walks being held by queer people for queer people. So these are the things that I get to have access to because of the digital accessibility of it. I can't think of another way that I would have gone about this if I did not have Instagram. Or another platform that's really popular with queer people is Tumblr. Basically, the gift of anonymity gives you a space to be as queer as possible and explore different things. So that's something I also came into late in life. It's not as popular in India in terms of translating into offline things.
Hmm.
But yeah, it is an option, definitely. If I'm someone living in tier two to tier three cities, that's the first place I would go to look for something in my city.
How do I build a meaningful life, a queer life, which kind of lets me find my ecosystem, my space, my system, my support, everything, my people. So, what do you think in 2026? What does a meaningful life for a young person in India looks like?
Like for me, the way I define being queer is that my life is not defined by a lot of rules that have been put in place. And I inherently have this sort of aversion to you can do this, you can do that. Everyone gets to define what queerness means to them. But I think a combining factor is that experience as much of life as possible, create places for yourself where you get to explore and experiment safely, of course. And that can mean so many things to different people. For me to create a meaningful life for myself as a queer person means that I design a life on my own terms.
Hmm.
I sit with myself. I understand what from this prescribed list of things, what works for me, what doesn't work for me. Things like having a child, raising one in cities. I think the way of questioning that is also different for a queer person because when I imagine having a child in the future, so I'm imagining it with a woman. I'm imagining my partner to be a woman. So that looks super different. To build that kind of life for myself where I can enable these things that I want to do. Financial security is a big one, of course, for everyone, but especially for queer people who want to live a fully realized queer life, key, so that you're not answerable to anyone. You have to really take stock of your life and pick pick things that really matter to you that you would want to be a part of your life and not do away with parts of yourself because oh you have to adjust, you have to give this up for that. I think that kind of thought process just completely goes away when you're a queer person. I mean, if we're going to imagine a better society in those terms, then of course I would love to live among people who who are at least curious and understand there are so many different ways to live a life. I mean, each life is queer in its own way, I would say.
I don't know how many people, even in my generation, with the global exposure, with the education, are very comfortable with their children coming out to them and not claiming to be part of a hetero society. So I find
Hmm.
that dichotomy and that hypocrisy there. That even though we claim to be modern, it remains, and that's a very hetero thing to have because superficially we are becoming modern, but are we really?
When you were saying ki so many people you see coming back to that conservative viewpoint, I, in a way, I can understand that because people look for comfort in the face of uncertainty, right? I'm sure parenthood is extremely difficult in those terms. It's just a whole field of uncertainty. So having a kid who comes out to you and tells you that this is the life that they will live can be very difficult as a parent to accept. One important thing to remember is that we live in such a different world now, and younger people can take care of themselves. We need to have more faith in them. They will find their way. It's the whole coming of age process, and they're so much smarter than
Hmm.
we give them credit for.
Hmm.
That's something worth considering कि जिस बनाए हुए उसमें format में we've been living and people are trying to cling on to that
Ah.
has been outdated for a long time now. Like outside of the queer scenarios also, people have been crying ki, oh my god, let me do these things, do those things, and not be limited by my parental restrictions. Yeah, so it's been outdated for a long time now, and it's just like thoda sa you have to have faith ki this is a new world, and people will have to find their own ways, and they will, because there's no कोई कमी नहीं है of opportunities and ways to find.
In today's time and age, the government has kind of legalized it, right? But I want to understand from you, do you feel, does your generation feel rather also, that do you feel really understood by institutions or simply recognized by them?
I think it's a long way to go before we can really understand those things in terms of workplaces and institutions. But the fact that we are even beginning to recognize and make spaces for that is a win. I will not minimize that. I have been lucky enough to be a part of workspaces where it's safe for me to talk about my queerness. Obviously, I think there's an inherent sense of okay, you are, we know, but don't be like with your pom poms all the time. So much of this relates with the experience of being a woman, right? You're supposed to have an inherent understanding of how much space you can take in any scenario.
Hmm.
So in those ways also, a lot of queer women miss out on exploring their own personality,
Hmm.
because it's so expected कि तुम ठीक है, तुम्हें इतना दे दिया गया है, तुम शांति से बैठो. Yeah, in terms of workspaces, I think we are moving towards a better reality. Even if it's performative, it's something. We're at that stage now. I mean, at least if it's binding you legally as a workplace, ki you cannot fire someone over their sexuality.
Hmm.
Still something. Still something. Even if somebody gives you a really sour experience at work in terms of that, you can go and take an action against them.
Hmm.
This is what I tell my parents all the time without saying things. मैं देख लूंगी, मैं कर लूंगी. You have that faith, and I've been lucky that my parents do give me that space. कि हाँ ठीक है, ये कर लेगी. And of course, you have to go through that process of showing it to them. कि yeah, I can. So building that, giving your child that space is important, I think.
When you think of identity in today's day and age, and identity has become more visible, right? Even if we are saying no, we are not showing, but whatever, the moment you scroll through somebody's Instagram or whatever, you have a certain sense of that person, right? What do you think is the psychological cost of constantly being seen, interpreted, categorized, and you're expected to explain yourself? What do you think
Hmm.
it means? How do you feel about that?
People get very attached to their online identity. So it's important to detach a little bit from that, I think. I'm going to take the example of Instagram. Like, it was a big move for me to publicly announce on Instagram, ki, okay, now I'm out. I put a little rainbow against my username, and people who notice it, they notice it. It definitely, matlab, I'm trying to say that it was a big step for me. And since then, it's been a lot of being brave about posting things that I would not have otherwise, placing myself in that context in front of everyone I have known. If even if it is not a social issue as such,
Hmm.
if it's something that's even hinting towards a queerness of sort, this group of people is going to be like, oh, she's on her gay nonsense again. And this group of people, the queer friends that I've made, there's this sense ki, am I saying the right things as a queer person?
Hmm.
There's a lot of that subtext within the community. So a lot of psychological monitoring in terms of posting online, sure. But I do my best to be like, okay, I cannot be giving too many, I cannot be caring so much about this. Ki I forget how I operate, who am I. If I want to express something, I will express it. It's not my problem how the other person takes it.
Hmm.
So I would say if it matters to you, it's worth it. You should take up that space as well. Why not? I
Hmm.
think that's the principle that a lot of queer people follow.
When I look at it, historically, family structures are very fixed, right? As you also said that you were imagining, if you look at the possibility of having a child, it would be with a woman. In that sense, if you are reimagining what a family would be in the Indian context, what do you think? How do you reimagine the idea of family, partnership, caregiving, old age? How do you reimagine that in the Indian context?
Compared to straight people who have this timeline key, okay, by this age I have to do this, by this age I have to have a kid. So it's a very inherited plan, right? But I have, I guess, the privilege of redesigning that for myself,
Yeah.
which certainly does not feel like a privilege in a lot of contexts. But I do consider it a privilege because I live my life like that. Queerness is not just about sexuality for me. It's very much about how I design my life, how I,
Hmm.
do these things outside of sexual scenarios. Like anyone else, I've gone through the motions of understanding, do I want a kid? Do I want to get married? If so, then when? Since in my partnership, there is no man, I'm sure it will be a whole different world of challenges to even announce that partnership to the world, let alone have a child, go through the legal processes, all of that. Even coming out was something that I took like that. Ki, okay, I can drive myself crazy thinking about, okay, how will I tell my parents? How will I tell this person, that person? But then it's like, I have to have faith that by that time, the way that I've been living my life would have amounted in an inherent sense of confidence of being that I would be able to see that through just how I've been able to do everything else. And also because यही करना है मुझे, there's no other option नहीं, not in a bad way, but यही करना है तो मैं किसी ना किसी तरीके से तो कर ही लूंगी, of course. So I have that blind, I guess, young people wala faith left in me a little bit,
Great.
that fearlessness ki
Hmm.
fine, if I have this, I can tackle that. Yeah, things will be different when it's real, but I still will have that faith, I think.
Do you think this positivity and optimism, a lot of people from the community have it as a young person? You think your generation has it more than the older ones?
Probably, yeah. If we compare it like that, probably, because we get to be out and about much more than people before us probably did. We get to claim very mainstream spaces that people could not. You had to be in this spot, in this space. So that definitely gives you a certain sense of confidence. For me, it's not even a second thought.
Hmm.
What do you mean? Like, if I'm faced with that, if it's in my face, that's a different scenario. But I'm not sitting and thinking about that a lot. And I don't think a lot of younger queer people are. When you're picturing your future and you've realized your identity that way, I think it becomes easier to picture your future than harder.
That's great to know. That's really wonderful, I would say. So, do you ever feel that there's a
Yeah.
pressure to be a particular kind of a poor person, or rather than simply being yourself? Do you get to be yourself?
The irony is that even in queer spaces there is a certain kind of a rule book, not rule book, but a prescribed sense of this is how you are queer. But it's definitely not enforced like that. And considering the world that we live in right now, we try to make rules. So there's a lot of moral policing going on, I think, within the queer community. If I upload a story, something serious, so I can anticipate that there will be other queer people will have a different point of view about it, and we're all very loud about it as well. So I think it gives way to a lot of infighting about that. But I think that's the nature of things, right? Queer people think about things more introspective than others, I would say. So they're trying to find a way to exist that works for themselves. It's important to remember ki if I'm saying I'm queer, the meaning of that is that I'm trying to be as less defined as possible. Personally, that's my thing. Well, I do not put me in any kind of a box. I will run away at the slightest hint of a box. So I think for most, a lot of queer people, that's the reality. They like living their lives like that. So it's important to come back to that. And yeah, people do. Yeah, ऐसा कुछ नहीं है कि you have to be, if you're not like this, then you're not gay. I think it's more of a, inherited white people queer problem. Ki, okay, you're not gay enough if you don't do that.
Yeah.
We are still at a stage that we are even trying to understand what it means to be Indian and queer and in these spaces. So we don't even have a language for that. So a lot of it is inherited, which doesn't sit really well with us, but we don't have anything else to grab.
If you really want to understand the space, the community from the Indian context, as a young person trying to figure it out, are there any recommendations you want to give which people can understand it from a cultural context, which can help them feel okay, I don't have to be only what the West tells me?
In terms of content, there's of course you can find millions of things. I have this friend who said this once to me, and I hold that very close to me, that the places that you're looking for, sometimes you have to create them. You have to be the one who creates that. And I think no other place than this queer scenario where it fits more perfectly, because it's a desperate need for more people to you know live their own kind of life and share it with other people, so that we can see that a different sort of lifestyle is possible. And it makes a huge difference. I think there is so much, you talking to other queer people changes your life. Like, it makes such a big difference. It's worth it. The discomfort is worth it.
Can you give me an example from your own life?
I went on this trip, which was a queer women's trip. Seeing couples be so free and open in that space, it was so healing for me to see that. And it's not something that only white people get to have. This is happening, people are doing it. Many more people than you would have imagined are living that life. So just even having that glimpse is great.
So we now have increasingly become sophisticated, right? In the language which we have created, like a more sophisticated language of identity, boundaries, trauma, relationship, and selfhood. So do you think this greater definition or awareness brings more clarity, or
Hmm.
has it also introduced other forms of complexity?
Your identity is made up of so many little things that are more visible and being talked about more than ever before. I struggle with that a lot. Ki, especially if you're in your 20s, that's my experience. I'm sure people in their teens are also experiencing that because they're online. So much chatter about boy trauma informed stuff, boundaries, things like that, which make you question everything in your life. And it's not like you can isolate one thing from the other and be like, okay, this is this is that. Life doesn't work like that. You don't function like that. It can be super confusing, but these complexities already exist within us. Living a life is complicated. You are a complex being. And having any kind of language is always better than not having it, I would say. It'll be a little bit of a bumpy ride before you figure it out yourself, right? I firmly stand on the side ki, if as a teenager I have access to these things, which can make me think about my life from a different lens,
Hmm.
it's It's a blessing. It's great to have that. As a culture, we are placing more importance on talking about all of this. Mental health has been such a huge conversation for years now, and we're
Hmm.
making a lot of significant changes because of that. Like, I mean, I am someone who's benefited so much from the mental health chat online, you know.
Are there things which can make you feel, okay, I am putting myself out there, but I also have a, a certain zone where I can feel safe? What did you do, or what do you recommend to a person who's in that place where they're just exploring and there's this lot of unknown?
I feel like social media also gives you a sense of false safety. So I don't really struggle with that a lot when I'm online. Ki, am I safe right now? You should be able to express what you want online, but you also need to be careful. So
Hmm.
how do you crack that balance? That is difficult to answer. I know this is going against everything that we see every day online. Like,
Hmm.
I'm someone who does not say this very lightly because I've been so personally affected by how negative everything is online. It's good to remember कि anonymity में लोग बहुत कुछ बोलते हैं.
Hmm.
So you have to develop a thick skin. You cannot be like, every little stub toe cannot bother you the same amount. You have to build that a little bit, especially as a queer person. I think you have to build that capacity a little bit of endurance, because you will inevitably be in situations in your future where somebody will say something shitty or worse, you know.
Today, as a 29-year-old queer person, it's just not about your sexuality. Basically, is more than that, and it is in many parts of your identity. What is it you would like to tell the world, that it is not just about sexuality, identity is more than that, and how? What is your expectation, rather, I would say, you know,
Hmm.
that from the world? What would you say?
Like, I feel really strongly about this. Ki I would want to create a life that I'm personally proud of, I'm satisfied with, I'm fulfilled by it, so I can build a model to show other people my age, younger people, older people, everyone, ki this is possible. You know, you don't think about this, but it is possible. That would be my biggest honor if somebody gets to be like, you know, I can imagine a different sort of a life because I can see someone else doing that. So
Like in the physical space, you see that this kind of thinking trickling down more to cities which are beyond, like a Delhi, Bombay, big metropolitan cities. Do you feel this impact or this trickling down to
hmm,
smaller cities and towns? Do you see that?
I do. I mean, trickling down and even maybe trickling up, because so many times it happens that we who live in these cosmopolitan areas, we are very removed from lives that people are living in these cities, right? And it can be way more liberating than our definition of being liberated. A part of me is very optimistic about that, but I also have to see the reality that I do anticipate a lot of friction in those terms, you know, because the more people try to liberate themselves from a certain idea of existing, the harder a certain group of people are going to implement that, because the way it registers to them is that somebody is snatching away their way of being that has been validated by thousands and, you know, years. It feels very personal to people when you look at someone who's living a very different life,
Hmm.
not at all conforming to what you're doing, but still is happy and maybe happier. So I don't think it's going to go without a fight. There's enough of us now out and loud and proud that we can, you know, you queer people have never been erased. Never, nobody has ever been able to erase us. And now it's just growing and growing. We're all doing the work of building our own versions of life, and we're gonna. I think, yeah, people are going to fight hard for to preserve that, because you realize the value of that. This binary exists in your head, ki you're straight, you're gay, all
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
But when you're hanging out with someone and you're actually connecting with someone,
Hmm.
those things fade away in the background. If we do manage to move towards real authentic experiences and connections, that's something that I see a good future for us to coexist, and I keep my faith and like firmly planted in that direction. We are naturally moving towards more deeper connections with each other. So it's a natural consequence of that.
Optimism is that you are kind of creating the way you live your regular life and living it on your own terms. You are creating it in reality in how you're being, and there is hope out there, and there is a space out there where you can be your own self on your own terms, which is very fabulous, and may it grow in abundance. That is my vision prayer for it. So thank you so much